So here we are, back at it again. I know YouTube has been censoring a lot of people and shutting down entire channels full of thousands of videos. And these days, you have to be careful about what you say because now we apparently live in, like the novel 1984, we live in a dystopian society. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of years inside of this dystopian society. And it's something that creeps slowly into our lives through self-censorship, through censorship, and through the mass media complex, where they tell us what we're supposed to believe is true about the world. But as my listeners know, I completely reject the vast majority of what mainstream media tells us and tells me in particular. I'm sure a lot of my listeners feel the same way as well. But what's deserving of a little bit of in-depth, sort of give this talk some context. It's the Hynek UFO report, an authoritative account of the Project Blue Book cover-up. Now, for those that are new to me, to this theory, to my experience, there are some really advanced scientific concepts that are in the public sphere that sort of get ignored by people who work inside of academics, by people who work inside of large media organizations, by various groups. And it's essential to know why a lot of these ideas are ignored, even though they're really groundbreaking and they're labeled as fringe, but they're groundbreaking and they provide leadership in the idea itself. The person doesn't even need to be around in order for the idea to provide a sort of direction for people to head. And that's essential for a lot of ideas. If you have an idea that can lead itself, you did a really good job. And I think this theory is one of those ideas. But addressing the problem with academics ignoring groundbreaking theory, I'll go ahead and read out page 17 of this book. It's a really, really good book. Celeste and I are going to review it together. Hi, Celeste. And we'll see what we can learn from it. But page 17, without further ado. At about this time, I was asked, actually, you know what? Let me put a little bit of context with this book. This book was written in 1977 and has been reprinted in 2020. So we're looking at 44 years, goodness, of this book being around. So I don't think it's really changed all that much, a lot of these ideas in here, but here we go. At about this time, I was asked by Battelle to undertake a particularly interesting study. Poll astronomers to find out how they feel about flying saucers. To initiate this survey, I was to seize the opportunity afforded by a national astronomical meeting, after which I was to travel to various observatories and query astronomers directly. I was to bring up the subject casually and not in an argumentative form, so as to discover what each scientist thought about the subject, privately. I did feel somewhat like an intelligence operative, but since I knew that the quest was for a good cause and would result in no embarrassment to my fellow astronomers, I went along with it. It may come as a surprise to the reader that 41% of those I queried were sufficiently interested in the whole subject to go so far as to offer their services if ever they were really needed. 23% felt that UFOs presented a problem that was more serious than people recognized. Only 36% were not interested at all or were totally hostile to the subject. I'm sure those percentages have changed over time. This was more than 4 decades ago. The 41% figure, those who are sympathetic or more than sympathetic, deserves comment. I have heard some of these men disavow any interest at all in the subject of UFOs when engaging in a group discussion with their peers. Yet when talking privately, they admitted the opposite. I have observed this phenomenon so often that I am led to call it the committee complex. It might be stated as a theorem. A scientist will confess in private to interest in a subject that is controversial or not scientifically acceptable, but generally will not stand up and be counted when, quote, in committee, end quote. Scientists are deathly afraid of voicing support for anything that might make them look foolish in the eyes of their peers. Anything that might be considered unscientific. Thus, the decisions reached by the various panels and committees that have met from time to time to consider UFOs were, in a sense, predictable. The panel members voted for the safe decision every time, which was, of course, anti-UFO. And that basically sums it up here. Scientists are deathly afraid of voicing support for anything that might make them look foolish. The fear of embarrassment, the fear of ridicule by their peers is what drives the vast majority of scientists these days. They don't want to be considered idiots. They don't want to have their credibility damaged. They don't want to be looked at as being incompetent or what have you. Unfortunately, that type of self-censorship gives rise to a perpetual ignorance concerning facts that are observed in nature. And my specific example is that ignorance regarding planetary evolution, because this is the theory of planetary evolution. I called it the theory of stellar metamorphosis, but it's the same thing, the theory of planetary evolution. I could have called it planetary evolution if I wanted to, but I chose metamorphosis because that resembled the formation of life too, because that's what stars do, they create life as they evolve over many billions of years. But in a sense, the reason why I wanted to go over this, the proof from an astronomer who was researching UFOs and has seen it so many times, is that the reason why most people don't speak up is because they're afraid of ridicule. They're afraid of being looked at as being a fool. But if they would just kind of swallow their pride, if you will, and just branched out and took a chance, they might actually, get something really special in return. Because as far as I know, the statistics on my YouTube page aren't as stellar as some other YouTube channels, where they have millions of views and stuff like that. But my proof is in the unique IP downloads of my papers on Vixra. Paper number 62, I just checked it today, has 4,442 unique IP downloads. That's 4,442. That's thousands of people have read it. Yet, where are all the academic papers concerning it? Where are they? Paper number 62, which is the book Baz and I did together, has 2,492 unique IP downloads. Thousands with that one too, and that was, back in 2018, I believe, that we put it up. I think 2017 or 2018, I can't remember. But that being said, this theory is all over the world. There are lots of people who have seen it. There are lots of people who understand it. Yet the committee complex sort of takes over. And I would be curious to know how many individuals who work inside of these astronomical communities who know better, who know what's really going on, and just sort of keep hush-hush about it because they don't want to be, jeered at and ridiculed and be pushed out of their communities. Because a lot of the goal of some of these communities, a goal of some of these communities is to keep community cohesion. And you do that with ideas that they all accept and they all believe together. The nail that sticks out gets hammered. They don't want people to question the underlying assumptions of the parent organization, because that causes, controversy, and it makes people feel uncomfortable. And it's much easier to have everybody think the same way. And that's very, very dangerous, especially in times of data coming in which challenges our worldview. And we need to look at that data and actually speak up concerning that data and say, hey, you know, this data exists. You can't sit there and, you know, bullcrap your way around it. You know, you have to face the facts now. And I think that's what's happening currently in today's astronomical communities, is that they're realizing that the stars and the planets, it's not stars and planets. The stars are the young planets and the planets are the ancient stars. All right. Of course, read this book if you get the chance. It goes over how Blue Book completely ruined UFO studies and just completely mucked up everything. Coming from J. Allen Hynek himself. All right, there you go.